What's up everyone, welcome back here at the Neon Pavilion. My name is Niklas and it is time. The Eurovision Song Contest 2023 is over and it is about time that we talk about the show. Now, as some of you may notice, the pavilion is not very neon today. It is starting, we're getting into the summertime now. We're getting into the summer here in Denmark, and at least it's been very nice actually the past couple of days, but it also means that the airflow in this room is basically non-existent. I wanted to keep my windows open doing this, and I can't because there's a lot of noise going on outside. So I thought, okay, I'll close the window, and the best thing I can do is at least try to keep the temperature that it already is in here by just not turning on the lights, not turning on the LEDs in the background. So we're gonna do it like this. I think that's the best way we can do it. It is the final video, of course, of the 2023 season. It is going to be the final time that we talk about the Eurovision Song Contest in Liverpool. Of course, it's not the end of Eurovision. No, for many of us, it is still this time that, we want to talk about Eurovision. We're gonna talk about Eurovision for the rest of the year, of course. But, I think I did that last year as well. I want to round off, talk a little bit about what did I think about the final, but also what did I just think about the Eurovision this year in general. There is a lot to talk about, I feel like. But at the same time, a lot of the songs I've already talked about in the video, both where I talked about the rehearsals, but of course also the semifinals. So I'm not going to focus too much on that today. It's more just about, what did I think of the show? Who were the winners? Who were the losers? All this kind of stuff. Just like I did with the first ones that I did, the video I did on the rehearsals, the video I did on the semifinal 1 and semifinal 2, I am also doing this live. I've had a plethora of technical issues and things that I've had to work out over the past week here because, live streaming, it's not something that I've done a lot of. And I definitely haven't done it in this kind of way that I've been doing it here. So there are definitely some things that I would like to do differently. But I do hope that you have enjoyed nonetheless, and that you're going to be enjoying today as well. Leave a like if you do so far. And of course, if you do happen to catch this live, you can always leave a comment over in the live chat, asking a question or anything, and I might get to it in the video. So let's start off by just talking a little bit about the production itself, because I think that's one of the most interesting things this year, because I've really liked this. This production, honestly. I've always wondered what a modern Eurovision from the United Kingdom would be, because while they have definitely hosted many times, they are the country who has hosted the Eurovision Song Contest the most. I don't necessarily think that their hostings are, in my opinion, some of the most memorable or some of my favorites. Maybe it is because that the United Kingdom hasn't hosted while I've been a Eurovision fan. I've been, a fan since 2002. Around that time was the first time that I watched it. I was very little, but, I have a lot of nostalgia for those competitions. I have a lot of nostalgia for how Eurovision used to be in the beginning of the new millennium, because that's when I started watching it. But I'm sure there's a lot of people who have a lot of love for those old contests. I was very interested to see if they could put on a show that felt modern. And I feel like they have. I feel like they've really put on one of the best Eurovisions that we've had in recent times. I think I've already talked about the stage and I've already talked about the graphics, so I'm not gonna get too much into that. I do have a whole playlist on my channel called Eurovision 2023 where you can find all the videos that I've made where I talked about the graphics when they were released. I've talked about the slogan and the logo and of course all the rehearsals and stuff. You can check that out if you want to, but TLDR in case you haven't seen it. The graphics, I think, are some of the most modern and out there that we've had in recent years. I think they are so interesting because finally we're seeing something that we hadn't really seen before. It's been very bright and it was toned a little down when it came to actually the live shows. I would have still loved them to actually do the bright yellow background for some of the on-screen graphics. But I think in the video even I said that I didn't expect them to do it. So it's fine, but I would love, I do hope and pray someday that, we're just gonna get some Eurovisions in a row where we don't have a blue background for something like the scoreboard, for example, but I'll let that slide for now. The stage I wasn't a huge fan of in the beginning, but I really ended up loving it. I think we've seen so many different ways that the stage could be used this year, and many of the acts have really utilized it very well. It's been very interesting to follow, especially the thing where the LEDs in the background, the panels have been able to move backwards and forwards to create different kind of environments. You know, you can be super immersive, and you can be very intimate, and you can be very in there if you want, but you can also just like have it all the way open, and you can have a big open space to play with. I think there's been a lot of great here. So all in all, I'd say this has actually been a fantastic production. I think BBC have proven that they are a big media house who really knows what they're doing, and it's been a pleasure watching the show. Just the little things like, you know, having a show that didn't run overtime. I think it may ran over a little bit in the final because, you know, of course, having something like Loreen staging, you know, having to set that up before you can have the winner's performance, that does take a little time. And spokespersons, they always speak way more than you expect them to. They always have so much to say to get their, you know, 1 minute of fame or whatever. But they were close to, you know, keeping it on time, what they had planned. The production has just felt very slick. It hasn't feel like there's been many hiccups or many things that they had to, you know, work on. Everything has just felt very fluent, and especially coming after Italy last year, it was such a nice change of pace to see this year. But of course, it's also been, you know, a bit of a different, interesting Eurovision this year, because it is the first time for many, many years that the contest haven't been hosted in the country that won the previous year. Of course, it's also been very different than the other times where the BBC have stepped in to host, because this has been a on behalf of Ukraine show this year. I don't know why I was about to do air quotes, because that's, you know, that was the thing with it. It was going to be a show that was done on behalf of Ukraine with Ukrainian elements. It wasn't Ukraine who said, we don't want to host next year, so whoever gets to host, they can just do their own party. It was very much Ukraine's party. And in the videos that I've done where I've talked about the semifinals, I've really praised them for actually doing that. I've really felt like they kept that Ukrainian spirit in there. We've had so many different Ukrainian elements. I've loved some of the interval acts that they've done. I love that Julia has been such a main host throughout it. I think that was absolutely the way to go with it. Unfortunately, a lot of that I feel like cannot be said for the grand final, and that sucks, because the grand final is the main thing that people are seeing. I feel like for the grand final, the Ukrainian elements were a little bit more in the background, and that bothers me, because I think this was really the place where they could show the united by music, and I don't think they did that justice. Having the Ukrainian acts just mainly being in the flag parade, I thought that was a bad way of doing it. I think had it been me, I would have probably taken the elements that you had in the Liverpool songbook and actually just put that as the flag parade instead. Because I gotta be honest, I was very excited for the Liverpool songbook. I thought that was going to be one of the big things of the night. And it didn't turn out to be the case. I felt like it just felt a little flat, and it didn't feel like it belonged. There wasn't a lot of introduction to the acts or to the songs. It felt very random. And as someone who was born in 1997, sure, I know some of these songs, but I didn't know all of them. I didn't know the story of them. I didn't know what made them specifically Liverpudlian. I don't know if it's the artist who originally did them or if it's the songwriters. It just felt like, you know, there was so much more they could have done. I thought, you know, when they mentioned that they were gonna do this, I thought, great, they want to do some of the same as they did, as Israel did in Tel Aviv with the Switch song. But I didn't feel like they succeeded with that at all. It just felt very random. And, you know, the whole build up to having Sonia in there as like this big thing, it's something that bothers me. Probably more than most people, because it makes it seem like that Sonia is this Eurovision legend. This song, the Better the Devil You Know, it's the Eurovision song from the United Kingdom that everyone remembers. Is it? Because I really don't think it is. And building it up to be this epic thing that 30 years after her performance, she is back. What a moment. Was that really such a moment? I just sit back and think, oh yeah, it's that Eurovision song that I didn't know before until everyone started posting it because we're in Liverpool this year. It felt so flat. I can imagine that this was a huge moment for the UK fans, and I can imagine it was fun in the arena, but for the average TV viewer, this made no sense. And especially in a year where we want to unite by music, I feel like some of these songs they picked, Daddy's song, which was by Atomic Kitten, I don't think that song was very popular in Eastern Europe, for example. I think many of the Ukrainians... I gotta say, by the way, I was in a room full of Ukrainians when I watched the show. I had set up a viewing party for some Ukrainians that I know on a refugee center here in Denmark. So I watched the show with a lot of Ukrainians, and there were no reaction to any of it during the Liverpool songbook, because I don't think they knew many of those songs. And that's one of those things where I feel like that's probably what bothered me the most about this, was that this was what they wanted to show off. This was what they wanted to show off on the evening. A bunch of songs that we as Westerners know, but maybe not the rest of the world. And that didn't feel very united at all. I feel like even me as a Dane didn't know all of these songs. And, you know, having Sam Ryder there as the big interval act also bothers me in a way. You know, you could just as easily have had Kalush Orchestra come back and do their new single instead of putting that together with Stefania in the beginning of the show. Because once again, it felt like the focus was so much on Sam Ryder. And yes, he's had a fantastic career. He came second last year. He's a great performer, no doubt about it. But putting him so much in the spotlight when he didn't win, I didn't enjoy that very much. If it had been a case, like for example, you know, I have watched them, but I wasn't alive for any of the Eurovisions where, you know, another country had stepped in to host. So of course, I can't speak much about that, but I can speak about, for example, the Junior Eurovision in 2015 when Bulgaria hosted because Italy, the winner, declined to host. And of course, that felt very much like a Bulgarian show, but that was also okay because Italy had declined to host. So Bulgaria was free to take it and run with it. And Krysia, who was the singer from Bulgaria in 2014, was just as much, if not more, in the limelight in 2015 than Vincenzo, who had won. And that's fine, because Bulgaria offered to host, and they did it because Italy didn't want to. Ukraine wanted to host. Ukraine was part of the production this year. But I just cannot imagine that Suspilne is 100% satisfied with how the Ukrainian elements were treated in this. You know, you have the Liverpool songbook, but you also had that interval act in semi-final 2 with the Ukrainian music. Why was the Liverpool songbook important enough to put in the grand final, but the bit with the Ukrainian music and the Ukrainian artist wasn't? I didn't enjoy that. And I also feel like, you know, the addition of Graham Norton, we always knew that they were gonna do something with him. But I felt like it was so pointless to have him in the final. He didn't add anything to the lineup of hosts, and it just meant that Julia was pushed to the side and she didn't get to do the voting. And I didn't like that at all, because I praised them for doing the double hosting and having Julia and Hannah as the main hosts. And all of a sudden it was Hannah and Graham as the main hosts. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is that motivated them to do it like this, but I think they should have done more of the UK elements in the semifinals that aren't as watched and gone all out and tried to really balance it 50-50 between UK and Ukraine in the final. But they didn't do that. And I'm just disappointed by that. I don't think any of the grand final interval acts really stood out. Where I think the interval acts that stood out for me, those were the Ukrainian ones that we had in the semifinals. I thought they were way better. They looked better, even though I wasn't a huge fan of the Be Who You Want to Be or whatever it was called interval act. I also feel like that looked better than some of the interval acts here we had in the grand final. I don't know. I feel like they used the best stuff in the semifinals since then. What a shame that is. Could you hear my stomach growling there? That was a very angry growl there. Someone is asking in the chat who my favorite country was this year, and that was definitely Austria. I talked a little bit about that in the semifinals as well. And while we're on that topic, should we get into it? Should we talk about the final ranking? Let's actually do that, because here is the result. I'm sure most of you know the final results already. Of course, it is a victory from Sweden, which means that we are going to Sweden next year. And I'm hoping that Eurovision 2024 will be the first time that I actually attend, because believe it or not, despite having been a Eurovision fan for so many years, I've never actually attended the show. So I hope that, you know, being from Denmark, I will hopefully get the chance to actually go over there and experience the Eurovision magic. I've been to Junior Eurovision, but I've never been to Eurovision. Sweden came first, Finland came second, and Israel came third. We're going to be talking about the winners in a second, but let's talk about some of the surprises and some of the ones that didn't do as well as people expected. And let's start with Austria, because I did talk about that this was one of my favorites of the year. It was my big favorite. It was the song that I loved, and a lot of people loved it. I've always said that it wasn't going to be a winner, and I still stand by that. I never expected the song to be anywhere close to winning, but only coming 15th, I would say that is a surprise to me. The staging, I think, is one of the main things that let this song down. It just felt a little flat when we actually got to the live performance, and I felt that in the semifinal as well. And I talked about that having this as an opener, I didn't feel like that made a lot of sense. I can kind of understand why the producers wanted to go that route, because, you know, they obviously heard how many people were singing along, clapping along in the semifinal, and thought this is going to create a moment there in the beginning. And that's what, you know, we want to start the show with. But I don't really feel that the song had the right kind of energy in its staging that it needed to really be that opener. And I think that's just what made it a little forgettable. Had it been a little longer into the show, maybe you would have remembered it a little bit more. But I think, you know, having this and then having Portugal after that, which was such a burst of energy, even though that didn't get many votes either, I do still think that, you know, that's the thing you remember as the beginning of the show this year. So Austria, I just think, became a little lost. Another song that certainly also became more lost than I think anyone would have imagined, that's Spain, you know, just getting up there to 100 points. I know a lot of people have loved Spain this year. I was never a fan of it. It's just not my style, and I always said that I would be a little worried to expect this to do super well, because the style of it, this flamenco style, it's very popular in Spanish-speaking countries, no doubt about that. But in the rest of the world, it's just not a style that a lot of people love and will pick up the phone and vote for, because it is an art form. It's an acquired taste, and you have to be into that kind of stuff to really enjoy it. I'm personally not. And I think a lot of people shared the same sentiment as me and the juries as well, because, and you can say a lot about the juries, and maybe we'll get into it when we talk about the winner. But I think this was just, you know, so far out there, so not mainstream, that it was just a little bit too much for some people. And maybe it's the same case with France. I don't know if it is, but while I liked the French song, I also never saw that as like a winner candidate. And I don't know what went wrong, because the vocals were great. I think it looked stunning on television. But it was just, maybe it was just a little bit too forgettable. You know, maybe that's the same case with the United Kingdom. It was a fun bop, but it was just not memorable enough. And you have to remember, you know, you have to go in there, pick up the phone and vote if you want to get those televotes. And people will probably mostly vote for the songs that are really their favorites. And if you aren't necessarily that many people's favorites, maybe people still like your song, but you aren't like the top ones that they want to vote for. And I think, you know, maybe that was the case for both Austria and France. Not so much for the United Kingdom, maybe. I think that was more to do with just being a little down the line, maybe being a little bit of a disappointment in, like, compared to what we saw last year, where so many people got behind Sam Ryder. There wasn't the same kind of hype for it this year, and maybe that's why, you know, they ended there in the familiar second last place there. But I think for Austria and France, maybe the case was just that a lot of people love them, but it wasn't their number one or number two, and usually those are the ones that you're voting for. When you only have 20 votes to give, you want to focus those on the ones you really, really love, and maybe that just wasn't the case this time. And hi to Elliot in the chat. Lovely to have you here. You know, that's not something we get so often. I'm always on the ESC Fan TV chat. You know, that's fun. Sometimes I go in there and comment as a viewer. It's not often that I do live streams, of course, so it's not often that I get some of my ESC Fan TV friends joining here, but hope you enjoy some of the things that I have to say today. We are talking about the grand final, of course. But should we talk about the absolute bottom as well before we get into some of the songs that did really well? Let's talk about, you know, I've already said a little bit about the United Kingdom, but Germany coming last, I don't think a lot of people expected this. I always knew that it wasn't going to do super well, but coming last, I don't know if I necessarily expected that, but I can kind of see why it's the case. First of all, rock music just, you know, sometimes it does really well in Eurovision. We've had years, but there's also just been years where it hasn't done so well. I don't think, however, that you can use that as the reason this year, because if you look at Australia coming 9th, you know, it was a similar sort of vibe, but they did very, very well. So what was it with Germany? I think one of the things that I will definitely highlight is that I just don't think the lyrics were very great. Blood and glitter, sweet and bitter, we're so happy we can die. Does that make any sense? I don't know what the song was supposed to be about, and I feel like that's probably what a lot of people felt, that while it sounded great, it was great instrumental, great vocals, the lyrics of the song just makes it fall flat, and it doesn't feel like, especially compared to Australia that had perfect lighting, you know, perfect staging. I really loved what Australia was doing. If you compare those two, you're a rock fan, you want to vote for some rock this year, obviously you're gonna vote for Australia because they just had the better package, I feel like. And I think that's maybe just the case, that all the rock fans, they went out there, they went and voted for Australia, got them a fantastic placing. They didn't do too great in the televote, I'm aware, but maybe there just aren't so many rock fans out there. But I think for the juries, you know, it was also just about, you know, you compare these two, where you're gonna put them. And Australia just felt like in such a different league, and it felt so good that, and sounded so good and worked so well, that then you look at Germany and think, compared to that, this doesn't feel just as great. And I think, you know, that comparison may mean that Germany ended up lower down the line than they would have done if Australia wasn't there to take the rock vote. I don't know. It's all speculations, but let's look at the top 10. Let's do it. Let's actually talk about that. Czechia being inside of the top 10, I'm so happy to see. I've loved that song. Not from the beginning, but it really grew on me, so nice to see that there. Australia I've already talked about. Estonia, definitely one of the jury songs this year. You know, they just managed to scrape through in the semi-final, but I think this was something that the juries could really get behind, and nice to see them get a great result. Belgium is in there, Ukraine is in there. It's nice to still see Ukraine get a good result. I don't think the song is as bad as people want to make it out to be. Visually, it was absolutely stunning, and of course, you know, the song was not too bad either. It's definitely in a different style than what we're used to at Eurovision, but I think it's nice to have different styles, and having something that feels a little bit more electronic, a little bit more R&B, having that come in the top 10 could hopefully mean that we'll get something like that, more like that next year. And just, it's so nice to see Ukraine being a powerhouse and sending something different each year. They aren't afraid to take chances. They aren't afraid to send something authentic, and we should applaud them for that. Are there any sympathy votes in there? Who knows? And who cares? I certainly don't. Coming into the top 5, we have Norway, which is great to see. It was always interesting to see if that song would keep the momentum that it had when it won the MGP and, you know, was a huge TikTok hit. I think it managed to do so. I believe it came 3rd in the televote, so it has done something great there. Very nice to see. Italy in 4th place. I don't think a lot of people saw that one coming, but I love the Italian entry this year. I think it's one of their better in recent times, so I'm very happy to see it in there. But my biggest surprise in the whole top 10, that is definitely Israel. I did not see that coming at all, but I think there was just something about the Israeli performance that the jury really loved. That was the wrong button I pressed. There we go. I think there was just something very jury friendly about that because it was polished. I think her vocals sounded good. I think it honestly it worked very well with what they wanted to do there. And it's nice to see Israel being praised for that. Was it one of my favorites? I don't think so. But whatever the case may be, I think it was nice to still see it in there. And, you know, they took... I do want to say that Israel took a risk this year. You know, they sent someone who was a big artist, and it was a big risk for her. I guess that's what I want to say with it. It was a big risk for her going on that Eurovision stage, knowing that, you know, if she didn't get a good result, maybe that would be bad for her career. But she did get a good result, and it did show, and I think we're gonna talk about that in a second. It did show that the juries very much seem to favor polished pop this year, which is one of the things that we can talk about, because I think I do agree with what a lot of people are saying in that juries just, they don't vote enough for songs that take chances and are a little bit outside of the typical pop music. And I think that is a shame, because Eurovision, while it may have been very much a pop contest in the beginning, it embraces so much more today. And it is a shame that we don't get to see the juries award that more. Maybe it's a case of broadcasters not really choosing people outside of the popular music industry to actually be on the jury. Maybe it's a case of the jury being too small, which means that people will just, you know, you find such a small set of people that the demoscopic, is that what it's called? It's one of those things where it's like, I can say it perfectly in Danish, demografi, but I do not know what it's called in English. But the amount of people, you know, the bigger jury is, the more genres and the more groups of people will be represented. That's what I want to say. And maybe that's just, you know, that's what we're missing. But whatever the case may be, you know, we have Finland ending up there on 2nd place, despite being the absolute fan favorite, you know, getting the 2nd highest amount of televoting points ever, I believe it was. Very interesting to see, getting lots of 12s, getting a lot of support from inside of the arena. I was always very, you know, if you've seen my reactions where I talked about the semifinals, I've always been a little bit about, do I support Finland more? Do I support Sweden more? I didn't really know, because to be honest, I was never... None of the songs were ever in my top 10. They were never among my favorites, but Finland really put on a show, but it was different. It was in Finnish language, which is something that maybe isn't as accessible. It's not something you hear so much. But I think I agree with what people are saying. It is a shame that the juries don't appreciate this kind of music as much, you know, and it isn't just the case for this. Måneskin didn't win the jury vote either. GoXLR didn't do well in the jury either. These songs that are a little bit outside of the Eurovision norm, the juries don't really seem to support. And that is a shame. Is there anything that can be done about it? I don't know. I don't know if there is, but I do think that, or at least I hope so. I don't know if they will. They probably won't. But I hope that the EBU do listen to some of the feedback, because this isn't the first time that people have talked about that changes needs to be made to the juries. I am not in the camp that thinks that juries should be eliminated completely. I still think having them in there makes a lot of sense. Yes, we don't see as much block voting anymore in the televote, which is great, but I think there are still things that could happen if we had a televote only, where, you know, the kind of social media campaigns you can do now. I think that could, you know, potentially be an issue. Especially, you know, as we get closer and closer to actually, you know, doing fully online vote. We had more and more countries, you know, trying out this online vote. Of course, we had the rest of the world as well. I very much prefer, of course, the way that they're doing the online vote in Eurovision compared to Junior Eurovision, where you can vote for yourself. I hope that the ESC.vote, I hope that that system gets implemented in the Junior Eurovision as well, because what we've seen the past couple of years with, you know, how popularity really makes a difference in that vote, that's a huge issue. That's a huge issue. But I think that's also one of the reasons why I think the EBU may not look at this, because there's been so much complaint from pretty much everyone. You know, every single fan has a problem with the Junior Eurovision voting. But of course, the broadcasters who keep winning, who keep benefiting from this, of course they don't want to change it. And the winners are also the ones in the reference group. The ones who do well are the ones who get to sit in the reference group. So the reference group in Junior Eurovision are full of broadcasters who benefit from this system. So that's an issue. And I think it's the same here, because of course Sweden, whether you like it or not, has a huge impact on the Eurovision Song Contest. But they are also some of the ones that, you know, gets the most out of how the jury is at the moment. So I can see the issue there. Whatever happens, we'll just have to wait and see. But I think Finland put on a fight, and I think it's nice to see them up there. It's nice to see a song in Finnish do so well, because it's definitely not one of, you know, the favorite languages of the European people. I feel like it's so nice to see. And I don't want people to see this as a failure. Coming second is never a failure. Of course, it's a shame that we won't be going to Turku or Helsinki next year, because I think the show that Yle produced in 2007 was a fantastic show. And I would love to see them produce a modern Eurovision, that's for sure. But at the same time, we shouldn't be too harsh on people who voted for Loreen. We shouldn't do all this. For God's sake, the slogan of this year was United by Music. Let's actually unite over the fact that we had 2 amazing songs up there in the top 2 this year. Let's focus on that instead, please. Let's just focus on, it may not have been the best year musically, but I still feel like looking at that top 5, we had the best songs in top 5. You can agree or disagree. Well, you can agree or disagree on if you think that the order of the songs in the top 5 was the right. We can talk about that for a long time. I'm not going to, but I think we had the best songs there up in the top 5. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about Loreen. And I was almost going to say Euphoria, because you're so used to saying Loreen and then Euphoria. Are we gonna get used to saying Loreen and Tattoo? I don't think this song will go down in history as big of a song as Euphoria was. I think this is a song that's carried a lot for the staging. And I say that despite Tattoo being a song that I personally enjoy more than I enjoy Euphoria. I've never been a Euphoria fan. I think this song is better, but I think just like with Måns Zelmerlöw and Heroes in 2015, it's a good song that was elevated with a great new kind of style of staging that captured especially the juries and a little bit of the televoters as well. What I'm most excited about, of course, is who is going to win Eurovision 250, the big vote that we do at the end of the year coming up to New Year's Eve. Who's going to win that? Who's going to win that? Will it be Finland? Will it be Sweden? Because I think there will be, even then, you know, we have to remember this, the voting doesn't open until like October or whatever, but I still think at that point people are still gonna talk about, was Loreen the right winner? Did Finland deserve that win instead? Maybe we're gonna see that in Eurovision 250. It'll be interesting for sure. But I don't want to sit here and talk about was it the right winner or not, because frankly, I'm just one person. And if it was up to my opinion, Austria should have won, because that was my favorite. But I can also look at things objectively and think I can understand why that wasn't, you know, the main favorite. And at the same time, I can understand why Tattoo won. It was a huge gap between the jury and the televote, but it was also that's not what I want to say. Let me try that again. There was a huge gap between Loreen and second place in the jury vote, but there was also a huge gap between Finland and Loreen in the televote. So it was a year where there were a clear winner in both camps, which ended up with the jury winner being the winner. And I get why people get upset over that, because I think that, you know, people always prefer the televote winner to win, of course, because we are fans, we are passionate about this. I can understand why people think like that. But I think what I don't understand is that when Tattoo won Melodifestivalen, there were so many people saying that this can win Eurovision. When the song was released, you know, just the little snippet that was released before her semi-final in Melodifestivalen, when that was released, everyone loved it. There was so much support for this song. People saying that it was one of the best things that they've ever heard. And I wonder where those people are now. And I hate that this is a thing that keeps happening, that people have a song that they are passionate about, but then another song comes along that they are more passionate about, and suddenly the first one they were passionate about, that's just trash, that's boring, that's stupid, we don't want that winning. And I don't understand why we get this now, because I still think there's a lot of people who love Tattoo. I still think there's a lot of people who think this is a fantastic winner. It may be their favorite winner. And of course, those were the people who voted for Loreen. Maybe there weren't as many people who voted for Loreen as Karia, sorry. But there were still a lot of people who voted for Loreen. She still came second in televoting, and people who are talking about rigged juries or whatever, or if juries should be eliminated, all these things, they are talking about it as if Tattoo came 10th or 15th or 20th in the televoting. It didn't. It came second because there was still a lot of love for this song. So looking at it like that, I do think it deserved to win. Of course it did, because it had the majority of support from the juries, and it had a lot of support from the televote as well. It's not like it didn't have any support. And it's not like just because it didn't receive 12 points from any televotes doesn't mean that it wasn't loved. There was still a huge amount of people voting for this song, and that's why it won. Had there not been any people, you know, loving this as much, had it came 10th in the televote, it wouldn't have won. It just simply wouldn't have won, because if you look at it, let's go back to it. If we look at the difference between Sweden and Finland in the final results, it's not a huge gap. It really isn't a huge gap, especially with the big numbers that we have now in the voting system we have. This small amount of points between these two, you know, it wouldn't have taken a lot. If Loreen had came 5th in the televote, I don't think she would have won. So saying that, you know, no one liked Tattoo in the end, it shouldn't have won. It wasn't anywhere close to a public favorite. I just don't think that's true at all. So we're heading to Sweden next year. And I think, you know, you can say what you want, but I think at the end of the day, a lot of us will still be looking forward to Eurovision 2024. There's no doubt that SVT once again will be putting on a fantastic production. They are one of the, you know, the powerhouses of TV production in the whole of Europe, and I am so excited to see what kind of show they will be putting on next year. I hope it will be bold. I hope it will be different. We're probably gonna get a lot of ABBA because it is the 50th anniversary of their win. And can I just say, by the way, I love the conspiracy theory of that the jury vote was rigged and the juries were voting for Sweden because they wanted a Eurovision in Sweden next year because it's the anniversary of ABBA. Like, who comes up with conspiracies like that? Who comes up with something like that and think that's the reason, that's the only reason why she won? The whole thing is corrupt. How do you come up with that? I seriously do not get how do you come up with stuff like that, but it's my absolute favorite. Of course that's not why she won. Of course it isn't. But I can imagine that we're gonna see a lot of ABBA next year. Maybe we'll even get them all reunited on the stage. Wouldn't that be great? I'm sure a lot of people will love that. Let's try, I do hope that they try something different and try to push the boundaries of what Eurovision is, because I feel like they did that in 2016. I hope that they will do that again. It was such a fantastic show back then. So many iconic interval acts, a fantastic production, great camera angles, great stage, and it'll be interesting to see what they'll bring to the table this year, next year, sorry. And if there are elements, you know, from the show next year that will become iconic Eurovision elements. Like, for example, the thing with that we don't have the little lower thirds anymore that says the name of the song when they start. You know, we have that in full on the screen, and there's a lot of fun with the on-screen graphics that started in 2016 that, you know, we're still seeing today, and there are going to be elements that we saw for the first time this year that we're hopefully going to be, you know, seeing in years to come. Like I said, I would love if SVT looked at the graphics this year and thought, that's fun, that's bright, that's exciting, let's try to do something similar next year. That'll be interesting to see. Will we get Petra and Måns back as hosts? As much as I love Petra Mede, I think she's fantastic, I would love to see someone else have a go. You know, they have so many good people that they can choose from, so many great television presenters and singers that could do it very well. So I hope that they shake up the bag and do something else next year. It'll be interesting to see, but I think it is still way too early to do all these kind of speculations. Let's still have fun with the Eurovision 2023 songs. Let's just still blast them on our phones, on our stereos all summer long. There are some great songs, of course, that may end up being some of the Eurovision evergreens. We never know in like 10 years time what are the songs we're going to be talking about. Will we be talking about Cha 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 like we are talking about Dancing Lascia Tombai? We don't know, but I could definitely see that being the case. Will we talk about Tattoo like we've talked about Euphoria? I'm not as sure about that, but it'll definitely be interesting to see if the song will go down in Eurovision history the same kind of way as Euphoria did. But I think that's it. I think those are the thoughts that I have. To answer the title of the video, is this the best Eurovision in recent years? I very much think that it is. I think it is one of the best ones. It is definitely the best of, like, you know, the 2020s so far. I love the production in Rotterdam, but I do think this one takes it up a notch. But yeah, I think they did a great job. Like I said in the beginning, I just wish we had more of the Ukrainian elements in the grand final instead of just keeping it in the semi-final. And there was just some elements this year that was a little too British for someone who isn't British. Some of the fan service, like I called it, you know, Sonia in there, Scooch in there, the Fizz in there. We didn't need to have all those little, what's it called? Why is that word just out of my head right now? Those little cameos that probably made a lot of sense to UK viewers, but maybe not to the rest of the world. I didn't enjoy that too much. Let's hope we won't have those kind of things in the same kind of way next year. We're probably going to get a lot more humor next year because that's what SVT does best. But anyways, I do think those are my final thoughts. It is one of the best Eurovision in recent years. But was it, you know, groundbreaking? Maybe not. Maybe not. But still a fantastic production and something that we will remember for years to come, that's for sure. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on Eurovision 2023, and I hope you enjoyed the content that I did this week. I really wanted to do something this week because, once again, I feel like my Eurovision coverage, I have so many great ideas in the beginning of a new year, and I want to do so much more. And I didn't feel like I delivered this year either, which is a shame. I did a few interviews, I did some content, but I didn't do as much as I wanted to. Hopefully, I said that last year as well, but hopefully 2024 will be the year of the Neon Pavilion. Hopefully I can do some more content coming forward. I definitely have a lot of ideas of stuff that I want to do for this channel, but it's more off-season stuff, and I think that's one of my main issues, is that actually a lot of the content that I want to make is more off-season stuff, you know, talking about past contests, past national finals or whatever. But I'll figure something out. It'll definitely be interesting to see what we can do on this channel moving forward. But I do hope that you have enjoyed the content that I've done this week. I do hope that you want to subscribe. Because I want to say thank you so much for watching, not just today, but for watching, the people who have been watching my content this week in general, or just this year in general, watches the channel in general. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this little show talking about the grand final, please remember to leave a like and subscribe down below if you haven't already. Lots of fun stuff, like I said, coming up on the Neon Pavilion. I have some great ideas for some off-season stuff that I want to do over the summer. I have a little series planned that's going to be a lot of fun, so there will be a lot of things to look forward to. as we look forward to Eurovision 2024 in Sweden. Where do you think it's gonna be? I hope it's gonna be in Malmö, but we'll see. Thank you for watching today, and I'll hopefully see you guys very soon. Thank you for a great Eurovision 2023.